there's no reason why you need to be in this car. Well, this is the 2017 Toyota Corolla XSE. It's the top of the line trim for the Corolla, and the reason why I have it is because I came to Los Angeles for the LA Auto Show, and I said, Toyota, what can you do for me? And they said, well, here, have a RAV4. I said, great, but I'm going to stay an extra week. They said, oh, okay, well, have a Toyota Corolla. So here I am in a Corolla, and well, I'm in LA, so let's go places. Now, right off the bat, I can tell you that the Corolla is nothing to write home about. Actually, I don't want to get too offensive with this thing, but it will show up on one of my infamous playlists on YouTube. And it's not one of the best car playlists, it's the other one. The main reason for that is because this car has no power. It has a CVT, which means the transmission is constantly slishing and sloshing and sliding around on this internal scale to try and get me speed and efficiency at the same time. And it makes no sense, because while this car costs $24,000, there's so much stuff out there at this price range that sounds better, feels better, looks better, and well, here's why you should look somewhere else. First off, design aside, the interior is uncomfortable, and that's because you get this head restraint side impact safety from being far away from the side of the vehicle. But what they failed to do is bring the armrests out, so what you have is a big dead zone where your arm just falls straight down to the floor and there's no support. And the way the steering wheel lines up with that is basically you have an armrest on the right, but then if you want to put your hand up on the door sill, you have to be in this weird, funky, almost sumo wrestling position to utilize the door sill. And it makes it very uncomfortable. After about 20 minutes, you get very sore. And in addition to that, the seats themselves are not very supportive. Sure, I have power seats for the driver, the passenger's manual, but I still don't have any lumbar support. And that's just not acceptable in a $24,000 car. I mean, look at the Chevy Cruze. The Chevy Cruze Premier I drove was a very good price point for the car it was. Now, granted, the difference between this car and the Chevy Cruze is the Chevy didn't have auto emergency braking like this Corolla does. The Chevy didn't have radar cruise like this Corolla does. But if you look at the way it works on this vehicle, radar cruise only works above certain speeds, and lane keeping only works above certain speeds. And the problem is that it's not a full-time experience. And because of that, I'd rather have the features that the Chevy Cruze has, such as rear heated seats, a Bose stereo, and of course a more comfortable interior than what I see here in this Corolla. So first case in point is that when I first got in this car, I looked at it and went, wow, that's so much better than the RAV4. However, when I went to go find the volume knob, I almost couldn't see it. I actually reached for the hazard button instead, thinking it was the knob, because where I'm sitting and where my hands are on the steering wheel, it makes sense to go right here to volume, but it isn't. So volume is actually right here. It's a shiny black knob on a shiny black surface, and I cannot see it. I have to spend a lot of time looking for it. Now, of course, there are buttons here on the steering wheel that do the same thing, but for a passenger to find it, it's very annoying, and it doesn't stand out. So the way they've designed this to make it look very cool and hip, not necessarily futuristic, it's a waste of space, because I have a very small screen with lit soft keys on the side that aren't soft keys. They're basically permanent keys with a backlight. It's not what I would have focused on if I was designing a car like this. So they took a really cheap car and a really bad platform and they glitzed it up with the design, right? But they still put in these heated seat switches that do not self-cancel. They put in a sport button on a car with CVT. I have paddles on a car with CVT. Now, granted, I do have a sunroof, and that's a very nice feature to have, especially in sunny Southern California. But what I don't have is a great stereo. And for young drivers, it's nice to be able to veg out to some, well, good music these days doesn't exist, but you know what I mean. You know what? Something else this brings me upon is even a car like the Volkswagen Jetta has an SD card slot for the stereo. So you can do your own mixtape style MP3 collection, or even take your whole library off your iPod, and because, well, there's only one USB cable in here. In a Volkswagen Jetta, for instance, there's an SD card slot you can pop all your music into. In this car, I simply have to make do with a USB port, which is down here. I do have an auxiliary input, and I also have a cigarette lighter. But really, storage is very limited. I have cup holders up front, in the doors, and in the center console, and I have these very funky air vents. Now, there is an automatic climate control in here, and as far as I'm concerned, it is decent, but at the same time, I don't think it does a very good job filtering the air from the outside. It seems to let everything through, and that explains why I have my allergies here. Basically, what I'm sitting in here is probably the worst car for the $24,000 price point. If you're going to be spending that much money, look at the Chevy Cruze, look at the Volkswagen Jetta. One thing I found that really blew my mind was after Thanksgiving, I dropped my mom off at the airport in this car, and I found that I was amongst a sea of new Corollas at LAX. And they all had these stickers on them. They were either Lyft drivers or Uber drivers. But these Corollas are being bought by Uber drivers. And I have no idea why you'd subject yourself to that. I mean, seriously, there's no reason why you need to be in this car. If you're looking for rear legroom, get the Volkswagen Jetta. If you need more room than that, there are other vehicles on the market, the Accord, the Camry, the Passat. But something this size is meant to be small so it can be efficient. But why are Uber drivers in this thing? There must be some kind of deal going on. And that's what it comes down to for me. There are two types of buyers. Those who buy the car and those who buy the deal. And I think those who buy this aren't buying the car. When it comes to the Toyota Corolla, I foresee a lot of these things ending up in rental car fleets. And it's right there with the Chevy Cruze as well. Now, if I was going to be renting a car, I would certainly take the Cruze over this. And that's because the ride quality on this is atrocious. It feels like a really old BMW that needs a lot of work. Feels like the suspension bushings are worn out. The steering feels like the control arm is loose. It's got all this stuff going on with it, even though this car only has 800 miles on it. It feels very sloppy. And it's not the tires either. The tires actually aren't playing into any of this issue with grip. It's really the way the car is throwing its weight around. And if anyone knows about throwing their weight around, it's me. Something else about the interior to note is the lack of quality. Now, Toyota, I think, has really taken their halo of quality and perfection to their heads a little too much, because what I see in here is materials that I see everywhere else. I actually see other manufacturers doing things a little bit better, and that's with the textures, and that's with the sound quality. And well, just look at this door, right? This door has a lot of flat pieces to it, but it has this weird little angle with the door handle and the armrest. And I'm sorry, but that looks so cheap. That's the biggest, cheapest chunk of plastic butted up against another big, cheap chunk of plastic. And all I have to say is, when I first saw that, and I realized I was in a Toyota, I thought, oh, what a feeling. Because literally, that's reminding me that all the Toyota Corollas of the past, after the 80s, were good up until this point. And it's based on the fact that I'm in this car, and I have to look at that over and over and over again. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's take this car on a run down to Malibu through one of my favorite roads where I grew up around here. I'm on Malibu Canyon, and I'm heading down towards the beach, and I'm going to grab a coffee while I'm there. It's still 11 a.m. Man, look at that clock. Hideous. I have it in sport mode, which to me doesn't make a difference because this is a CVT transmission. And it's not like it doesn't weigh much. This thing comes in pretty hefty on the scale. I'll put the number right here. This car feels wider than it looks. And given the fact that there's all this space here next to me and there's no comfort on this side of the car, this car might just be a lot bigger than it looks. And the way you figure that out is you go on a canyon road that has a lot of cliffs and a lot of canyon walls, and you push your car to a theoretical limit, or at least to the performance envelope of the street, which is obviously the speed limit, and you see how it handles. And what you'll find is that every car does behave differently. And this road here, well, I learned to drive on this road. So, and what I can tell you is, with these hills, you get to understand the performance going uphill, and you get to understand braking performance at the bottom of the hill. We have a little bit of traffic today, but it seems to be moving quite well. So we're just going to enjoy this ride and see what it's like when we get down to the beach. Should take just a few minutes. Okay, the tunnel's coming up, and after this tunnel, the road gets much more involved. It becomes windy, and some of these people don't know how to drive because they're idiots, and I like to keep a bit of a distance here and then build up my speed through these corners so I don't have to use my brakes. So the good trick here is to refrain from tailgating, do the speed limit, and then when the road opens up, everyone slows down. So you want to keep your distance and then keep your pace through these turns. And you'll know, depending on how the car handles and how it grips in these turns, is the car capable of this road? That's all I need to know. Just doing the speed limit. Do I feel like I have to brake in these corners? So now, here we go, coming up on tighter turns. Yeah, definitely feels very light up front. It's challenged on the power, as you can tell. I don't know what gear it's in. That's why I'm more of a diehard manual fan, because you just keep it in gear and you can control your engine braking or even the application of torque out of corners. Driving a CVT through here is just the worst thing I've ever experienced. And of course that was the lane departure warning going off, even though I never crossed the line. So it must have badly predicted that I was going to cross a line. And even though I crossed the line there, it didn't go off. Now on the safety aspect, on a double yellow road like this, where it's very easy for someone to cross over if they're not paying attention or just don't know how to drive, you want to make sure you're in a car that has a very solid safety cell, something that uses high strength steel, something that's the latest and greatest of the safety programs out there. You want something that's the latest and greatest of all the safety features. And auto emergency braking, see that guy? Auto emergency braking and radar cruise and lane departure systems still won't help you stay safe when someone crosses the line in front of you. Very nice. It's just a very bland, impersonal feeling with this car. It's an appliance, it's a dishwasher, and it's the cheap dishwasher. So the problem I have with it being the cheap dishwasher at $24,000 is that it's not a cheap dishwasher. But what you're getting is safety tech like radars and departure systems and a fancy looking stereo. But it's not very good at any of it. And therefore, I think you can do a lot better if you look somewhere else. And for those of you who hate this review and say, no, Toyota's the best, I love my Corolla, it's a pure fact that you haven't looked around. You just haven't been bothered to do the research and the homework and look around, which means that's fine. You can be lazy. You can also be terrible at what you do and still get praised for it. Now, just because Toyota gave me this car when I needed one doesn't mean I have to give them a good review. I'm being honest here. And if you appreciate that, please give me a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel because I got more coming. Thanks for watching.